The 2020 Mazda CX-9 is designed to elevate every moment with a sophisticated SUV experience. Stunningly crafted with 3-row seating, including second-row captain's chairs. Book a test drive at Mazda.ca.
You're tuned in to Steve Megatron on Altered Geek.
Hello and welcome to Altered Geek. In this episode of Altered Geek, we'll be discussing our top 5 films right now, as well as the social kind of meltdown from the coronavirus on practically every event known to man. So joining me in this episode are Mike the Birdman Don and Alex from This Week in Geek.
Hello. That's right. It is us joining you from the Great White North, which only has, I think, less than 100 confirmed cases of coronavirus across the country. So go us.
Everything is melting, so it means people are going to get out in public more and they're going to die. Oh, that's not.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Why am I hoping? I'm wishing that it would go back to like minus 30 for like another week or two and kill off anything. Let people like be quarantined for a few more weeks.
Yeah, so there's a lot to break down with the coronavirus, and I'll give you the most up-to-date information I have from the Canadian perspective, because I do follow the news cycle on this, because I do have a family member who works in healthcare. So yeah, this is interesting, but we're also going to talk about some other nerdy kind of topics as well with Steve. What else are we going to talk about, or is it just those two main topics tonight?
It's pretty much just those two topics today. I'm not sure which one you guys want to tackle first, but
let's do the lighter one first, because coronavirus, or I don't know, I guess it's topical. We should maybe talk about the coronavirus for like just a couple minutes here. So as you guys know, this thing originated somewhere in China a little while ago. It has now spread to multiple countries around the world, though most cases are not from human to human contact. Like basically you come from an infected area, although certain countries are closing down schools and universities. Disney parks have shut down in certain countries. There was cases in Seattle in the United States where I think a woman did die in her 50s. In Canada, we have had some cases local. They did travel to, I think it was Iran and Italy. Locally, which is me and Alex are from the Toronto, Guelph, Kitchener area. So
basically within an hour's drive of where we are.
Yeah. So things are, our health departments are considering it a matter of importance, but they're not freaking out yet. There were people, this just happened over the weekend. There was a possibility of people being exposed, because they were traveling on the same bus as someone who had a confirmed case of it, but they're tracking them via like Presto cards, which is like a way you pay your fare to get on certain public transit. So they're pretty sure they've been able to get a hold of everybody, and they're telling people to self-isolate. If you think anything's wrong, go to the hospital, get yourself checked out. But the World Health Organization has pretty much said you should be paying attention to this. It's not a pandemic level yet, but be cautious, wash your hands, hand sanitizer. I've been watching social media, particularly among some of my friends. Some people, in my opinion, are acting a little nuts. They're like, oh, I'm stocking up supplies and medicine and everything. I'm like, okay, it's not the end of the world. It's not the apocalypse yet. It's not Y2K.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too when you look at it, because people are stockpiling face masks, which actually do absolutely nothing unless you physically have it. In which case you shouldn't be in public anyway. But then the amount of like bleach and like Purell and hand sanitizer and like all this other stuff is just flying off the shelves, which is honestly quite humorous, because it again boils down to the fact that it's just normal sanitation.
Yeah, wash your damn hands.
Wash your hands. Don't touch things. And if you do, wash your hands before you eat, before you stick your hands in your face, which is general knowledge anyway. And I saw a meme going around earlier, actually quite a few of them. Some of them not very,
tasteful.
Not very tasteful, but one of them was like, what did people do before this coronavirus? Not wash their hands? Like, it was it was kind of funny on that. And then I saw another one going around, and it says coronavirus be like, and then it's got Yakko, and it says, takes deep breath, and it's doing the Yakko's world where he's doing the United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, like counting it all off. And I reposted that one because I thought it was quite funny. I said it's not very tasteful with everything going on. I said, but nevertheless, I said it's still funny.
One of the things now, the coronavirus has actually hit close to me and Alex. Surprisingly, this happened last week as of this recording. GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, which happens in San Diego or San Francisco. Can't remember. San Diego, I think, or whatever. San Francisco. I don't give a shit. Either way, it got canceled. It happened in America. It got canceled at the end of business day last Friday, which means developers were scrambling, but a lot of the big developers had pulled out, like Microsoft, Activision, etc. Some people had pulled out of PAX East, like Sony, Square Enix.
Funny you should mention events. The events are up to 79 now at this point of like bigger events. I did get an email from Warner Brothers though, where they said that they canceled the premiere of the Superman Red Son, and all the actors and everything, and because they didn't want anybody getting infected. But this person I follow on Twitter, Sarah Evans, does digital PR and things like that. Posted a kind of a comprehensive list of conferences canceled due to coronavirus. So like everything from like Adobe Summit, the F8 for Facebook, a lot of the Cisco stuff, all of the Google different ones that are going around. There's all these other basically like tech ones, like all the Microsoft stuff's going. They're even letting employees work from home, which is amicable, in this situation.
What a concept.
Oh, you want to hear something? So my brother works at Google. And he said they've even publicly announced that like they don't want meetings of groups of people, 200 people or more in one spot, even in their own buildings. So when they do your regular company meeting, you might meet a certain time of the month for, they're making them meet in groups of smaller people, like and then conference calling in, because they don't want to gather like the whole company together in one spot just in case.
Why don't they just do a giant Zoom call?
Well, no. But that's the idea, is that basically tech firms like that, larger ones where you're employing maybe 500-600 people in a building, they'd rather you stick with the people you always come in contact with than have to communicate with other people. And that's just a safety precaution right now. They've also, them and other bigger companies like Microsoft, they've banned all flights or any business trips. My brother was going to go for a vacation down to the States, and he had to cancel it. And he got a full refund from the plane ticket, from the reservations that the hotel and everything. They have an actual relief for anybody that doesn't want to travel due to coronavirus right now. I didn't even know that.
Oh.
I mean, they're willing to take the hit rather than worry about somebody coming from Canada that might have it.
I mean, one of the things I noticed, the Emerald City Comic-Con's coming up, and DC pulled all their panels. Mm-hmm. That's pretty sad. Sony recently said they're moving up No Time to Die from April until November now.
I had purchased a ticket on Thursday to go see it on Good Friday, because we weren't going to do anything with our family till the Sunday. So I was like, oh, sweet, early showing of this. And then I got a letter saying that we have to refund your money because it's being moved by several months. I'm like, what? Okay.
One of the other emails I got today, my wife pre-ordered me the Talking Baby Yoda toy. Mm-hmm. And Hasbro had said, due to the coronavirus concerns in China, with our supply chain there, we will be unable to fulfill pre-orders for spring, which means May the 4th, which is traditionally a very big day for like Star Wars toys and everything else. They're not going to be able to meet the demand for toys that day. And I know there's delays with the Nintendo Switch right now. This is going to affect the Xbox Series X or whatever the hell it's called. PS5 will be affected, I promise you. things are happening out there. This is serious in terms of what's happening, but I don't think people should still freak out yet.
Did anybody else
I don't think we're
have
at
an alarm go off on their phone?
Yeah, that was the Amber Alert.
Oh, okay, I just popped because I just had to go grab my phone to see what the hell that was.
No,
yeah, sorry.
Here we get like snow squalls like all the time, and which is basically just a big cloud of just snow just miraculously appears and starts like blowing over the town. Which that does happen here. But no, I mean, I don't think we're quite at that point yet, but I do see the precautionary side of things of how they're definitely trying to keep everyone secluded.
Now, the big talk is there is a possibility, and I don't want to lend any, this may be conspiratorial in thinking, and you guys know me from my history on Twig, there's a possibility that the Olympics could get canceled this year. And that is so much money lost.
If any country was going to do it, it would be Japan.
Yeah.
They're a very clean country. They want to control everything. The worst case scenario is they invite everybody over and they have 1 million people show up and they have their island basically completely contaminated. And then what happens to the high-tech world?
Yeah. That's why I honestly think they should cancel the Olympics this year.
Here's a question. Do people even really watch the Olympics anymore other than reading the results or seeing highlights?
Honestly, there's big money in advertising.
Yep.
It's still culturally relevant, but it's not culturally relevant to us.
I could see them running the Olympics, but just not allowing it to be open to the public and only having the athletes compete and have the media there.
I think it's too much of a risk for them. I mean, ultimately, we'll have to wait and see. We will have a decision by, at the latest, I'm guessing May.
Well, when does it start, the Olympics? Because
July, August, I think.
We'll know. Yeah, it'll be middle of May.
We'll know soon.
Because that's when they're going to start constructing the everything is probably already ready for this.
Yeah, everything's ready to go now.
The only thing that won't be is May is when they're going to start building vendor spots. So
it's not already done now.
Yeah. Also, it'll tank the hotel industry.
Yeah,
it's gonna be bad.
Like traveling right now is not in anybody's best interest.
I also read articles that certain countries are banning. What's that called? Oh, I'm drawing a blank on it. Where you sleep in somebody's home.
Cohabitation? Airbnbs?
No. Yes, that's it. They're banning it until it's over. Like from being allowed to be run in the country, because you can't control who comes to your place or track who comes to your place.
Yeah, that makes a certain degree of sense.
Whereas a hotel takes your passport, they know who you are, so if you do get infected, they can trace it. They can actually call you and tell you to quarantine yourself.
Yeah,
and what's funny is I'm supposed to travel twice during the summer, and so like we're kind of wondering if, for work purposes, we're kind of wondering if they're going to cancel or have to reschedule things based on the fact that, you could catch something from flying in an airplane, or you can catch something from being around, thousands of people.
Yeah. Is it too far for you to drive, sort of thing?
Well, we're shooting a thing for work in Canada.
Oh,
actually.
Like north of you or our way?
Like Toronto.
So you better come up and see us.
If you do get here and we're not all dead.
Yeah.
We'll make a point.
It's not a wasteland.
And then the other one I got to go to, it's like a giant conference of people, and it's in Indiana.
Well, that's pretty neat to hear.
That's also that's the heartland, right? So I don't see it being as bad. Like I thought you were going to say something like you're going to a coastal city that has like a huge airport. Toronto should be fine. Yeah, Toronto should be fine.
I would think so.
Because they're like, they've only...
Yeah, it's mid-July, so...
They've only received like 2 additional cases in Toronto. So they're up to like 6 cases out of 5 million people in the area.
I think it's 15 across Ontario.
Yeah,
maybe.
Then that's basically in...
Nobody's died yet, though.
In 10 to 15 million people. Only like, that's what, like 0.1% or less?
Yeah, it's it's a remarkably low number. And most of those people are already in the self kind of quarantine. So
and the people that are getting affected, like younger people, the concerning thing is young people aren't getting, like usually really little kids get affected by the flu like that.
They're not getting affected.
Yeah,
no,
which is odd.
It's people with compromised immune systems and the elderly, which means someone like me would be vulnerable because I have the compromised immune system due to my amputation and the diabetes.
Yeah.
So I'm not going outside for a while, and that's just more a choice than anything.
Here's the scary thing. So normally, a virus like this, if it's on a surface, will die within like a day, or the maximum like a couple hours. They can't live on metal. Like they'll touch metal, it'll stay for a little bit but without a human contact, it doesn't work. They've been doing tests, and the coronavirus can live for multiple days on steel. So
wow.
And it's not transmitted the same way. It's not like just through coughing and spit. It's like they believe it can be from touch. So that's what's not been proven, right? They don't believe it can come from person to person yet. It has to come out of one of your, like some sort of fluid or coughing, and then if you get that on yourself and spread it to your mouth or whatever. But the idea that a doorknob could have it on it for multiple days without, if somebody leaves that house, doesn't come home for 4 or 5 days, and it's still on the doorknob. So when I'm going into like stores now, I'm like, I'll walk, and if I'm walking out there and I've got a cane or something, I will poke the wheelchair button and walk in that way. I'm not touching doors until this gets cleared up.
I think we'll see a major reduction within probably 6 to 8. They are working on a vaccine now, but that can take up to a year and a half.
If we don't see, let's say by the time May rolls around, when we're figuring the Olympics will either be on or off, if we don't hear that it's dramatically increased in cases in the next 5 weeks, then we'll probably have a beat.
Or at least significantly contained. Yeah, like again, take normal precautions, be smart, be intelligent, only listen to health organizations like the CDC,
and WHO,
your local health or organizations. Talk to your local doctor, whatever, but be smart.
And
that's pretty much information's your only weapon.
Don't fall down the hole of being racist. Oh, I shouldn't go near anybody who looks Chinese, like you see people saying
or
online.
Indian
or Middle Eastern. They're all dirty and have that disease. Stay away from them, because you see a lot of that online, and it's like,
yeah, the racism has gotten really bad in the last couple weeks,
especially for people when it's like they're like, oh, like I'm Korean, there's no cases there, and also I've never been there. like you have so many people that are born in the States and born in Canada that have never even been to where their family came from, and they're getting hit with the racism over it.
Yeah, like it's terrible. So ultimately, people, just for lack of a better phrase, don't be an idiot and don't be an asshole.
Don't hide behind ignorance.
Exactly. Information is the best weapon.
Yep.
So now that we have that unpleasant tree out of the way.
So transitioning over to the fun part, now that we've kind of destroyed that topic, well, with good information though, it's our top 5 films that we're interested in right now. Not necessarily like our top 5 of all time or our top 5, favorite, it can be pretty much anything. For instance, I've been watching a ton of movies lately, or at least trying, some for research, some for just, I need something to do to relax my brain at the end of the day. So what are some of the films that you guys have been kind of interested in?
Well, I guess I'll start to kind of let everybody gather their thoughts for just a couple of moments here. I'll probably do my first couple. So recently, me and my wife Blair, as part of our anniversary, and plus just to reestablish that man or that husband-wife bond, we decided to take a deep dive into the Harry Potter franchise. And the main reason we did that is Harry Potter is her Star Wars. She can tell me what Wingardium Leviosa does, how a Horcrux works, how the Patronus charm is done. She can tell me the wand movements. She can tell me that. I can tell her how an X-Wing works, what a Kyber crystal does, how Kylo Ren does X. this is her passion. So over the past couple of weeks, we've been watching the Harry Potter movies, and I've really discovered a new love and appreciation of that franchise. And I liked it before, but now I think I love it on a more deep level. And I might say these films may be creeping into top 10 territory, or at least in terms of franchises anyway. So to kind of kick things off, I probably would say that one of the films that's vibing with me right now would probably be Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And that one catches a lot of particular flack because it features Robert Pattinson in one of his first roles. He plays Cedric Diggory, who's the champion from Hufflepuff, who eventually gets killed by Voldemort. But it also features the relationships deepening over the course of the year between Ron, Harry, and Hermione. And you really just see how the John Williams score starts to evolve. The special effects take a noticeable step up from Azkaban. You have great performances from everybody in that movie. I mean, and I used to be part of the hate train for Robert Pattinson too, and I fully own that. But I go back and rewatch that movie, and I appreciate this kid more now, especially seeing how far he's come with his role in The Lighthouse, and more recently the Batman that comes out next year. So I've been really vibing with these movies kind of recently, and it's kind of nice to find a passion for a franchise that I haven't necessarily felt since Star Wars in the mid-90s, when I was really heavily playing the Star Wars role-playing game during high school at lunch. The passion with the franchise has become so ingrained in me in the last couple of weeks, in that I've been hanging out on Reddit a lot. Like, you can find me on the Harry Potter subreddit at multiple hours of the day. And there's an online publication called The Quibbler that they publish every quarter. And I'm actually submitting an article for it right now, or I'm working on one. I'm probably going to publish during the summer. And I'm approaching it like a college thesis, in so much so I'm gathering primary and secondary resources. I have books. I'm interviewing someone about developing points involving emotional intelligence and the evolving journey of the hero and personal self-growth over the course of the series. And I spoke to the editor of that today, and they said no one's ever written anything this in-depth for us or talked about the topic this in-depth before. We're really looking forward to it. And I think that's the main reason why this has stuck with me so much, has become something that's become my favorite recently. It's not often I get this excited about a franchise. I mean, Alex and I have been friends for years, but you probably haven't seen me care this much about something in a very long time.
Not since I got you into Stargate, and then you just disappeared out of that after a couple weeks of going into hardcore.
Yeah, this just caught me in a different way.
The reason you dropped out is that's when you had your amputation, and then you just never got back into it.
Yeah, so maybe once I write my article, maybe I'll go back and look at Stargate under a different eye, because that's something I want my media to speak to me. Like I know we talked about our favorite fictional characters a couple of weeks back, and it's really got me thinking. And I examined a conversation, and I don't mean to throw this person under the bus, but I'm going to have to for the sake of this example. Is one of the people we work with on GeekCast Radio occasionally is Blanchard. And Blanchard said, I'm never watching Harry Plopper. And if I never hear that joke again, it'll be too goddamn soon. But I started to think, what was it about that drew somebody so far away from enjoying a story, what is essentially about destiny, empowerment, choosing your own path. Your bloodline does not determine greatness. And I kind of looked at some of the things he likes, like with the Marvel movies and everything else. And I don't see a whole lot of differentiation. Like, there's some great stories in Marvel. There's a great story in Harry Potter. Yeah, J.K. Rowling is definitely a problematic figure within her own fiction, because she says some controversial things from time to time, and it's not exactly good for the community around it. So say what you will.
People don't want to change or learn or listen. That's the reason. honestly.
Yeah, and
first impressions apparently to some people can be everything, and if you've gone into it with a negative thought initially, nothing will change that person's mind, no matter how good it is, and there'll be bullshit explanations as to why they don't like it, but it boils down to, I said I don't like it, so I never will.
See, yeah. I didn't see the big issue with the movies themselves. Like, for me, it's more of a personal taste thing. So like I enjoyed them for what they were. I understood the stories. They were good. The acting was good. Especially after they swapped out the Dumbledore actor later after the first couple films.
Oh, he died.
And then after that point, it was really good. I kind of was like, okay, I'm over it. I've watched it. It's not bad. But you
at least gave it a watch. You tried.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is I'll try anything just about once. And then for the most part, I memorize the movies. And so I never have a reason to go back unless I really like the movie. Agreed. Or unless I forget it. And that wasn't one of my like go-to films, so I probably won't revisit it. But
to me,
that being said, I gave it a chance. Whereas Blanchard, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, even though it's going to sound that way. He also still associates Ryan Reynolds with Green Lantern and Van Wilder, which I enjoyed both of those movies for what they were. Yes, Green Lantern was utter garbage, but it was the gateway to getting him to play Wade Wilson.
It's what I was saying about first impressions. Blanchard is somebody who, once he sees something once, that's all he ever wants to learn or hear about. He wants no more change. That person is forever that one thing, and that's it. Unless that person also happened to be in something from the 1980s. If that person did something in the 1980s, it's okay for them to do anything from now on, even if it's garbage. They'll still like them because...
You mean like Dallas?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the main reason I brought that
canceled
up...
because I said something?
Yeah.
And the main reason I bring up that example is the fact that I was able to go back and rewatch these movies with a fresh pair of eyes, be willing to accept someone's passion as my own. And I'm thankful that I went back and did that, because not many franchises have ever done that to me. I mean, I love Ghostbusters, but I can fall in and out of love with that year to year, depending on what the fandom does. And with Harry Potter, I saw the movies in theater. I've seen every single one in theater, and I've only ever seen them once or twice afterwards. But going through these movies again, I actually had moments of self-reflection, and I was willing to look beyond them, and so much so I was looking at the philosophical elements, the journey of the hero, and just learning, be willing to look beyond what was on the screen, look to intent. And I think great art does that. Great art forces you, asks you great questions, asks you uncomfortable questions, and does things that the art is transformative. And I can't think of many movies right now that have done that to me. And they're not just simple kids movies, because if a kid has the emotional and I guess self-awareness, it can teach them things too. Like hard work pays off. You are not the circumstances of your birth. You choose your own path. And I think there's something very empowering about that. And I think it's a very healthy message for kids to learn too.
Also, it helps that there is a cohesive vision for the show, or like for all of them. Like they're infinitely better than any of the Transformers movies. Any one of those movies, and any one of those movies is better than any of the Transformers. Even Bumblebee. Bumblebee is good, but the Harry Potter movies will stand the test of time. They're just not even subjective. They're just objectively better made, better written movies. And when somebody says, I will never watch something on principle, that's when I have a problem with them, and they shouldn't have the right to even have an opinion because they refuse to even watch.
You should be willing to assimilate new data.
I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but you don't get to have an opinion, and your opinion doesn't matter if you refuse to even watch. or if you watch out of spite and refuse to give it any praise because you want to just make your point. So
and it was a fun movie for what it was. Like,
so that's the last I'll say on that, because I heard that Harry Plopper thing incessantly, and it's like, but why? Like, this is and like it gets thrown back at us with the whole like, oh, everybody just makes fun of Nickelback because they're popular. It's like, but that's the reason you said you made fun of Harry Potter.
Well, so. the other thing is the Transformer movies are really bad. They're not cohesive, and they're just a bunch of they're blockbuster movies. They're just a bunch of grinding metal slamming around.
Like 86 is, it's okay. It's secret. It's going to show up on my list. It's one of my favorite movies. It's still a bad movie. like it's not.
There's still animation errors everywhere.
Well, and it's not a well written movie. It's not a well executed movie. It's higher budget than anything they did. But like, I try to judge each movie on its own merits. Like I like the Harry Potter movies. I've never seen them since I saw them in theaters. But I
recommend you go back and watch the director's cuts, especially.
Yeah, I haven't seen the first two movies' director's cuts because I made the mistake of reading the second book before I saw the movie in theaters when I was in grade 10, I think. And I watched them like, that's not what happens exactly, because I remember reading the book and my favorite parts weren't in the movie. So I refused to ever read a book before the movie came out ever again. And then I never actually went back to read any of the books because I just let myself enjoy the movies as they came. But yeah, so that's your first one.
Yes.
What are the ones?
The other one, it's going to be kind of a dual entry, or I could almost lump these together, but I'm going to consider it a dual entry. And it was It Part 1 and Part 2. So these were the movies that came out adapted from the Stephen King book of the same name that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, and further upon the ABC miniseries in the 90s with Jonathan Brandis, Seth Green, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes the story of It, this creature from another planet or plane of existence that feeds on fear. It kills kids every 30 years in the town of Derry, Maine. And these group of kids team up against it, eventually kill it, or so they think. It goes to sleep, but things start happening 30 years later. The town wakes up and they got to come back and kill this thing. And what I liked about it is Stephen King adaptations, they're either really good or they're really bad. And depending on who you get doing the property, like Frank Darabont did The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption. He also did The Mist, which are three really good adaptations. The Pet Sematary remake from last year, nobody talks about, but I thought was really good. And Dr. Sleep, a lot of people slept on, I think.
And Castle Rock's great.
And Castle Rock is great too. So with the It movies, it's one of those movies that a lot of people had a lot of, is this going to work? Because seeing Bill Skarsgård, I think that's his name, who plays Pennywise the Dancing Clown, you have to nail the look of the monster. And they got this creepy guy, the right look, the right deranged appeal to him. And the strength of the actors, both in young and old, is fantastic. I'd say the first part's better than the second. The second one's probably a little too long by probably about 20 minutes.
And it has terrible CG.
Yeah, God. But it sucks you in. Like, it gets you like peril. Like the first movie, it's no big secret. I'm a big horror movie fan here on the show. I jumped. I'm like, Jesus. I jumped out of my seat as much as I possibly could. Blair had to cover her eyes for a second.
Biting the arm off is scary as hell.
Oh, yeah, because you don't see it coming. Especially because you're expecting it to be like the ABC miniseries with like Tim Curry.
Children don't usually get murdered on screen.
No, I haven't seen that many child deaths in years.
And same thing happens with Dr. Sleep as well. How sadistic and brutal it is, like something you would never have seen in theaters back then. It would have had to be a director's cut.
Yeah, like there was something that these movies are tapping into what makes the Stephen King movies scary. Some of it is some downright unpleasantness. Like in It too, there's some pretty open homophobia and racism, and that's pretty brutal and kind of sick. Unnecessary, yes, to a degree, but it's an ugly reality. And I just think how well Stephen King's works are being treated now. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with The Stand, because the last time it was made was in the 90s with like Gary Sinise, Molly Ringwald, Rob Lowe, Dauber from Coach, stuff like that. So we're going to see it remade, and it may be good.
Yeah. If they could go back to the 90s TV movies and really give them a good budget on theatrical, like I was terrified as a child of the Langoliers, and I laughed my head off when I watched it a couple months back and went, this is so bad, so incredibly bad. But my 9-year-old brain or whatever it was when it came out freaked the hell out of me, and I had nightmares. So if you could take that and actually do it now, the idea of the Langoliers of everybody wakes up on a plane and they have to land it, and they're an hour behind everybody else, and time starts to eat away at itself. Like,
interesting.
That's a really cool idea. Although they showed up and they were basically like these like Pac-Men
screensaver monsters
with they looked like the web creature from Reboot. and they were like with teeth that were like saw blades that were eating up time, and it looks so bad. But if you did it now, where you didn't show the monsters, you just showed like empty void where they should be, and like and the void getting larger and larger and larger, and like closing in on them, you could make a really good movie. Like, it'd be the kind of thing where you could do it on a low budget, have the people that redid the Invisible Man and the Blumhouse picture stuff, and have them do it. You could do these things, and it's proven that you can do them on a decent budget.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like I said, that's why these movies are vibing with me, because people are finally, not even so much finally, the technology and the directors are here now to take the work seriously, and I'm glad they did. I think that more people should check out the Stephen King adaptations that have come out, especially in the last couple of years. The Stand is one to keep an eye on, especially when the trailers come out for that within like a year, presumably. Now, that being said, The Dark Tower was terrible, which is unfortunate because it was based on a pretty popular book series. And I know there was like a TV series scheduled, but it got shit canned.
Dark Tower should have been HBO series, if anything. Yeah.
So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Another movie I really caught, and I caught this in Oscar season, and I don't know which one to go with. So maybe Alex, maybe you can help me out here, because I know you've seen both. I can talk about either 1917 or Jojo Rabbit.
I didn't see Jojo, but I've heard, it looks really good. I know a lot of people have seen it and like it. I would say 1917. Here's my idea of favorite movies are ones I can watch more than once. I don't know if I could watch either of those multiple times. Maybe Jojo more.
I think 1917 I might go back and revisit every so often, because the main reason, as Steve said, this is what's vibing with us right now. 1917 is one of those movies that every at least 10 years or so, we get some iconic movie that portrays a historical event. In the 90s, we had Saving Private Ryan, we had Titanic. In the 2000s, despite what people may say, we had Pearl Harbor, right? In the 2010s, which just passed, we had 1917. And 1917, the story boils down to two soldiers in a regiment are sent to deliver orders to a company of soldiers that's cut off, and they're walking right into an ambush. And eventually a series of mishaps happens along the way, and it gets down to one guy. But what follows is the journey, how he has to deal with being alone, cut off. It's very intense. It's very gripping, and it's seen as one seamless shot, more or less. Like, there are very few noticeable cuts. It's no wonder this won multiple Oscars this past year. It's so well put together that you feel like you're with them, like you're walking around with 100 pounds of equipment on your back, with your 5-round rifle in your hand, hunting down these German soldiers.
Yeah.
And it's something so intense. I can't think of another war movie that has touched me much like, say, Saving Private Ryan, which was good but was spectacle.
The one I would
Saving
say,
Private. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, if you were going to point to one. There's been a lot of war movies in the last 10, 15 years. Like, there was Miracle at St. Anna. There was Inglourious Bastards and all that. The only one that came close to this feeling was Fury, the tank one, with Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, who didn't shower the entire time he filmed for realism, apparently.
Oh, wow.
It's like Johnny Depp not brushing his teeth during Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. It's a World War II tank movie. And that in that movie, I saw it in theaters, and it was that sort of feeling where you're like, oh my, like you're so engrossed. It was so intense that I was sitting near the front, and there was an elderly man. He had to be like 90 something, and he was there, and the movie's over, and he's still sitting there, and he was sobbing uncontrollably watching it because he was probably there. You know what I mean? And an usher comes in and sits down next to him and is just sitting with him, letting him cry because of how he was, like, it was so real that he couldn't take it. And had, like, my brother and I, noticed it, a few seats down from us, we would have sat next to him and, helped him out a bit. But, like, apparently he had been like that for a while. And the only times I've heard of that sort of thing happening was when
Saving Private Ryan.
When that came out, you heard of all the people having PTSD after seeing it that had been in the war. And I can feel like 1917 is so long ago, there's nobody alive that fought in the war anymore.
No.
But I feel like had this movie come out, let's say 25 years ago, that old man could have been like that. That's how intense it was, like how real that world was. So yeah, I can say out of the two, probably 1917 I could see being one of the better ones of your pick. It's just not the most rewatchable one because it's one of those stories that stays with you.
It's so intense. Yeah.
You probably won't forget it, so you don't really have a need to watch it again unless you're watching with new people.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something you're not going to talk during, which is kind of nice too, because it's so intense, and it's such a memorable story with such great actors, performances all around. And it's not like Saving Private Ryan was good, but it was spectacle at the same time with like a sniper battle, Tom Hanks versus a tank. Or it's not Full Metal Jacket, where the first half is them training on Parris Island to go to Vietnam, which was social commentary at the time, and then the battle against the sniper, which was more, this is my opinion on Vietnam, and it sucks. This was a story about two people, and then it became a story about one person. I guess to move on to my next pick, something a little bit more lighthearted, but this is a biopic. Came out last year, Rocket Man. Rocket Man's the life story up to a certain point of Elton John. And Elton John's a musician that I've always enjoyed. I've always liked his music. I've heard like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, I'm Still Standing. Everybody knows Candle in the Wind. Can You Feel the Love Tonight from the friggin' Lion King. Everybody knows who Elton John is. His big goofy glasses, his dumb outfits. But regardless, I didn't know a lot about the man. So seeing it through this musical history, this experience really spoke to me. And I had some genuine moments of just feeling, like crying. And at the end of the movie, he's facing his drug addiction and his alcoholism and how it's driven him apart from almost everybody. And he starts, and the movie ends with him in rehab, and he's walked off stage, he's in his costume, and he's telling them, my name is Elton John. And he stands up and he starts doing the dance from I'm Still Standing. And the walls pan out, and then he breaks into the glorious I'm Still Standing song. And it's just enough of a different arrangement that it struck such an emotionally resonant chord with me that I cried, because that song has always been to me about surviving heartbreak, surviving hardship, and basically picking yourself up from the pieces that someone had hurt you so badly it broke you apart. And Rocket Man gave me just a lot of hope, and just some of the music was just fun. The music was just engaging, and I can't think of many movies like musicals that have really hit me like that. Now, I still haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody or Blinded by the Light or Yesterday. Blinded by the Light, I'm really curious about, because that's the Bruce Springsteen one where the like Middle Eastern kid learns about Bruce Springsteen during like the 80s. So I'm really curious to see that one. Trying to think of another movie here that really kind of hit with me. Oh man, well, I guess the easy one, because you said you're going to mention Transformers 86. I'll mention my favorite movie of all time, so I can rewatch it endlessly. Aliens. Recently started thinking about James Cameron, the very famous Canadian director. And I started thinking about what's his best sequel. And it came down between Terminator 2 and Aliens. And I think Aliens is probably the film that I like the most. I like the journey of Ripley, who started out in Alien as a victim who became a fighter, not by using brawn and weapons, but did it by being smart and clever. And then in the second movie, Aliens, she goes out to face her fears, to challenge what hunted down her and her friends aboard the Nostromo, and then she meets Hicks and Hudson and the rest of the Colonial Marines until only it's her, Hicks, Hudson, and Bishop left. And I just really like the Ripley character. I've always admired that strong female presence in Hollywood. And when she says, "Get away from her, you bitch," and fights the alien queen with the power loader, I can't just help but smile because it's so cool. Or when she's walking through the alien hive, just wasting them with the pulse rifle flamethrower combo. It's cool. It's one of the best action movies I've ever seen, because it knows enough when to let scenes percolate. It gives you enough of the universe to make it interesting. Like, you're not wondering, how does it work? You just know there are freezers in space. It takes an incredibly long time to cross distances. Corporations in the future still suck because Weyland-Yutani sells out an entire colony to harvest these alien samples, and they did it because they wanted it for bioweapons research. And this little girl has been surviving on her own for weeks at a time, months even. And she's watched her brother, her mother, and her father die to become alien drones. And she has PTSD. I think that's incredible. So yeah, when I think back of this, as much as I love T2 and the action scenes in it, I think Aliens is a better story. But Terminator 2, however, can make me cry, because when the Terminator lowers himself into the steel and says, "I now know why you cry," it's something I can never do. That scene tears the heart right out of my chest every single time since 1991. So I guess those are my top 5, right? That's 5 movies?
That's about 5 right there.
Okay, so right, good luck following that up. Good luck.
I got my list. I had it written since the beginning.
Good boy.
I have a couple honorable mentions that I'll just say first and not really go into them, because I was like, how do I add these in? Videodrome is one. And that's just sort of because I love Cronenberg movies, right. And it's sort of just the quintessential one. Cool. That's my throwaway. Also, Me, Myself, and Irene.
Really?
It's probably
Jim Carrey.
My favorite Jim Carrey movie. It's the other ones I'll laugh at scenes here and there, but it's the only one I laugh the whole way through. Probably because it's such a cruel, dark comedy, which is like way up my style. Like just the ridiculousness of it, like where when he has his evil half take over, and then like he's like in I don't even know what I should say, because so many things he does are so bad. Like he's in the shopping, in the grocery store, and he sees a baby breastfeeding, and then the next scene you hear the baby crying, the woman looks down and he's sucking her boob. Like basically it's everything that every evil thought that comes into his head, he just does as Hank. Like, or his neighbor's dog always comes over and poops on his lawn. So he just one day snaps and pulls his pants down and takes a dump in the front of his neighbor right in front of his lawn. Or just the ridiculousness of it. I love when something is so over the top that, which, you know, it fits my personality. So it has the funniest scene I've ever seen in a movie, which is the scene where near the end, they're on the bridge and he's like, just put the gun away, just put the gun away. And then he gets his thumb shot off and he just starts crying. Where's my thumb? And he's just the way it's so dark, and which is so me. So that's my, you know, honorable mention. It's not, you know, one of my favorites all the time. It's just one of the ones that I can go back to whenever I want something ridiculous to put on. That and Anthony Anderson playing his son, who's like an astrophysicist genius, is hilarious. Hearing him swear and talk like he always talks in every movie, only he happens to be brilliant, it's great. But these are probably my 5 favorites overall. Like, I'll go through a phase where I'll like a movie a lot and that might enter my list, but these are my 5 go-tos probably forever until I find something, you know, that I can watch 100 times in a row and still like. These are all movies that I've seen minimum 10 to 15 times, some more. So I'll just start off with Transformers 86. I've seen it probably 300 to 500 times. I have my beta cassette still on my shelf here from when I was 5 years old.
Can you quote the movie without having your monitor on?
Oh, yeah, I can do all that sort of stuff.
Me and Alex did that when we saw the movie together on the big screen.
We turned off the audio, and we were reciting the lines as they were going to happen, and then even did the sound effects. So, yeah.
And I cried during the touch. Yeah, like a bitch.
What's funny is Blanchard had his monitor go out about 3 years ago, and he was sitting there, like, listening to the movie, like, and live tweeting it.
Wow. That's next level.
It's my go-to. It's like, you know what? I need to kill half hour, turn my brain off. I watched that movie on my beta cassette every day after kindergarten and grade 1. So that's about 180 times minimum that year, or those 2 years. And I watched that beta cassette until our beta machine died in like 1997. When I was like 11 or 12 years old, my parents got me the VHS, which I watched until the tape died. That's funny. The beta cassette lasted like several hundred views, and it only has an error when it gets to the part where Unicron explodes. It sort of has a tracking error. But that's it. That tape has lasted over 30 years and over several moves. And last time my grandparents still had a beta cassette machine like 5 years ago, I popped the tape in and it still worked after watching several hundred times.
That's
so
impressive.
It's really too bad beta didn't take over, because it was a way more impressive than VHS dying. You know, VHS tape would die after like 20 uses if it wasn't stored properly. I have it on beta, VHS. I had the Rhino release at one point. I had was it the Sony re-release where they put it on 2 discs?
Yep.
I have the Blu-ray. I also have the UK Blu-ray that I imported when I was in high school when that first came out, when I was in grade 12. I also have the official Chinese release. It's not pirated. It's the official release for the region in China.
Is that the one that came in the wooden box?
Yes.
I had that too.
I have the wooden box, and I don't have the box anymore. I have just the plastic inner part, and it has everything, and it includes Headmasters too. Oh my God.
Same here.
Wait a minute. That has the English dub of Headmasters on it. I haven't even watched that in like 15 years. So yeah, so I've got the English dub, like I guess it's the Singapore dub or something. So yes. Anyway, that's how much I've liked that, and I have it basically in every format available. I had a VCD at one point too, so that was interesting. Basically, watching a VHS on a CD. So not much more we can say about it because we've talked about it forever. But that's one of my go-tos. It's got to be on my list because it's one of the most influential things on my life. Number 2, Boogie Nights.
Good movie. Thoroughly enjoy that.
My favorite drama, I think, pretty much of all time. I'll have a few others pop in and out now and then where I'm like, I really like that movie. That's a really solid movie. Like I really like the movie The Game, Michael Douglas. I also really like pretty much anything that the Alien 3 director has put out, except for Alien 3, because that movie
David Fincher, right?
Yeah, pretty much everything he's put out has been amazing. Girl with Dragon Tattoo, everything. But I would say my go-to for dramas, as far as like super high quality, is I like Tarantino, but his movies aren't the greatest. They're fun rides, but they're really not fantastic movies. Anything Paul Thomas Anderson does, though, with Boogie Nights, he did Magnolia. What else? There Will Be Blood. A few other movies, but like that, Boogie Nights is probably my favorite drama of all time. It has every element that I like. It's based in either the 70s or the 80s, in this case, both. Great music, a great ensemble cast, interesting story. It's about pornos. Hey, it has The Touch in it. Mark Wahlberg, he sings it, or tries to sing it. It has very memorable scenes. There's Dr. Octopus.
William H. Macy going crazy.
Yeah, William H. Macy going crazy. Dr. Octopus as a gay movie producer who has a Chinese slave boy that uses fireworks in his house. And they try to do a drug deal with him, and he wants them to smoke crack, but they won't. So they then the Punisher tries to rob him and gets blasted with a shotgun.
Thomas Jane?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It's my favorite scene in any movie ever is the Coke and Cash scene, which I will send a link. There's a YouTube video of it. It is the most tense scene I've ever seen. And it actually there's a part where Mark Wahlberg looks like has this dazed look on his face when he's there, questioning, what am I doing with my life? That wasn't intentional. He forgot his lines. So he sat there and they kept the camera on him for 30 seconds until they just moved on to something else. And they didn't want to redo the take because he actually he ended up looking like they wanted him to look, but they paused him for so long because he's just you can see he's panicking because it was only his second movie. Before that, he had done
The Big
Fear.
Hit?
No, Fear.
Oh, okay.
And he did this, and The Big Hit was the year later.
Okay.
So it's also that not only is it a look into the porn industry of when things went from being, they tried to make real films but have them be like erotica, to moving into the video sleaziness that happened in the 80s and 90s when it went to being just a basically cash grab, horrible, no acting, no safety standards, all that sort of shit. When it was actually in the 70s, for a while you could go to a regular theater and they would show pornos because it was like a prestige thing. Also, it's basically the story of John Holmes, because he in the movie they're making movies that are the Johnny Wad movies. So if Mike, I know you've had a fascination with that. Wasn't there a documentary about?
Yes, and it's incredibly well done, and so many good interviews.
Yes, so about him, it's basically it's the story of that mixed with Hollywoodism and everything into it. So it's got all these fantastic actors. It jumps through multi points in time. It touches upon everything that I like in a nostalgic style movie. So it's always on my list of favorite movies. I watched it on VHS when I was 14, and it became my favorite movie for the longest time. Third movie, Starship Troopers.
Good pick. Very good pick.
I like Paul Verhoeven's movies, pretty much every one. Hollow Man used to be my favorite Invisible Man movie, but the new Invisible Man movie is way better. But Starship Troopers has everything I like in a sci-fi movie. Space battles, huge elaborate sets, over-the-top, tongue-in-cheek, extreme violence. Michael Ironside. Political satire, Michael Ironside. Misunderstood with the media. It's got everything I like. Also, it has Doogie Howser using psychic powers to talk to a slug.
And a ferret.
Correct.
Cyrano, go get Bob.
And it has the Kurgan as a drill sergeant. And who else?
Casper Van Dien.
Yes. And you get to see Dina Meyer's boobs, which I'm very happy with at the time when I saw it. I saw the movie when I was 12.
She was such a a great part in that movie. She was a great supporting character.
And you know, she's underrated too when she was in Nemesis as the Romulan that helps them out at the end.
Oh yeah,
she's the captain of the she's been pretty good in almost everything, but she sort of like disappeared for a long time.
Yeah, but she does a lot of smaller television now.
And it's one of two movies that I actually like Jake Busey in, that and The Frighteners. So
hardcore agree on that.
Pretty much it. So overall, and it was like good cast. Probably it's the peak of the Paul Verhoeven political satire. Like you had moments in RoboCop, you had moments in his other properties like Total Recall, but I feel like this was where they gave him the most freedom, and then it just didn't click with audiences back then.
There's a great video. It's done by Joe Blow, and they talk about what happened with this movie, and they talk about a lot of studio interference happened, but they let Verhoeven pretty much do what he wanted, and that was a bonus and a detriment to it, because like I said, I remember this movie being very heavily advertised with Blur's Song 2, and it wasn't advertised as a satire. It was advertised as a straight action movie, which it is to a point. So
they basically ruined it.
You have to look into the movie beyond this is big monster fights. There is something very entertaining going on here, but it's deeper than that, because the United Citizenry or the United Federation, whatever it's called, they're
well, exactly. If you look at the movie, the best part is if you watch the
fascists.
movie, if
it's
you watch
not
it
a
at
good
face
place
value,
to be a part of. And
what
yet
you
they
end
treat
up
it
with
as that Paul Verhoeven does political satire like nobody else.
Just a blow up bug, stupid action movie. But when you watch it, and you're watching with all the little videos, the little pop-ups that happen on the screen, all of the story is really told through not what the news is telling you, but what the news is not telling you. That's the actual story. So they're like, the bugs started this attack. Did they? It's like they attacked our new colony. Why? Doesn't matter. They did, so we have to go to war. Or when they're showing people being executed for protests. The protest was just questioning whether or not we started the war. And they're getting hung and on public executions. And it's just like you're supposed to enjoy watching it. It's just a part of life. For instance, or when the Klendathu drop attack is, horribly goes wrong, and all these people die. If it had been anybody, in the regular soldier that did it, they'd be executed. But what happens is the person at the top says, "I am sorry," steps down, shakes the hand of the replacement, and nothing happens to them. They literally let thousands of people die. And their punishment is they shook hands and stepped down, and then later on in the sequel movies and that it's revealed that like the people that stepped down, they ended up becoming like pop stars singing songs. Like it's ridiculous. The people at the top don't get punished. The people at the bottom end up being destroyed. Really, really good movie.
I literally could not agree more. It's one of my favorite feel-good movies. If I have a guaranteed 2 hours to kill, it's one I'll always put on to.
Amazing soundtrack. Cost $105 million to make. Made 120 something. Made its money back, but was considered a flop. It's probably the most money Paul Verhoeven will ever get to use to make a movie because he's in his 80s now. I just wish he would come back and do one more American movie.
He'd be a guy I'd invite back to do another RoboCop, especially with today's political climate. It would be very interesting to see how that would turn out.
I would like him to take on something like, look at if there's a popular sci-fi or, book that came out in the last little bit, maybe a political satire type thing. Have him take on a new property, just, start it off, do one. I feel like he's been away long enough. Like his last American major movie was
Hollow Man, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was in like 01 or 02. And then he did Black Book, which was in English, but it was a Dutch movie about World War II. And then he's done a couple little ones here and there. He did a French movie, I think, in French even. And he basically moved away from Hollywood in 2003, yet he's probably one of the best directors of the 80s and 90s. It's just too bad he's not doing anything. my next one is one that you recently saw with me, Grandma's Boy. It's my go-to comedy. That is my go-to put on for an hour and a half. There's plenty of other comedies, and especially like you can put on the American Pie movies, you can put on 80s comedies, like you can put on things like Uncle Buck or Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. But I'll usually end up watching those for specific scenes. This is the movie, Grandma's Boy, that I'll put on to watch the whole movie straight through every single time. And it's not had a Blu-ray release. It's only had a DVD release. It's like $4 if you find it in a bargain bin. It's basically dude works as a game tester, testing Xbox games.
And everybody gets high. And then they got one really annoying guy that thinks he's better than everybody else.
Exactly. And who thinks he's in the Matrix, basically.
Yeah.
And it's the most ridiculous, stupid comedy.
It's one of the best Happy Madison movies that's ever been done.
It's the closest Happy Madison ever got to doing the Judd Apatow Superbad style of comedy. It has like the same sort of banter that they would have in that. And the other one that I could have flipped into this place would have been Beer Fest.
I've never seen that movie. I've always been curious.
We'll watch that next time I come over.
Okay.
But like this is probably the one where I laugh. There's not a single scene that goes by that I don't laugh at. And it's very rare for me to like a movie that much or like every part of a movie. And it didn't do well in theaters, and it didn't do well, critically initially. I feel like it's better than most comedies that come out now, for sure. I feel like The Hangover ruined comedy.
Probably.
I think the first Hangover was good, but after that, the formula became very
it was very stupid.
Well, I don't mean that The Hangover itself is bad. I mean like that first Hangover ruined comedy by making every movie think they had to do the same thing. The only other movie that really, other than maybe putting in Beer Fest, that I had thought about putting in this place, other than Grandma's Boy, was Tropic Thunder.
Yes, because nobody talks about that movie now.
It's funny.
Yeah,
he's a dude playing another dude.
It's probably those three are probably my go-to comedies more than anything. But Grandma's Boy is probably the quickest watch because it's the shortest one of the bunch, I believe. It also has more jokes per minute and more jokes that actually land. And if you are a super, nerd, we're basically in gaming media, right? So we cover gaming. So this is a funny peek back into 2005, 2006.
Yeah, it's right on the nose. It's right on the button because this was right when we were starting Twig, like 2007, 2005. So the eras were pretty close. Me and Alex were sitting there looking at the scenes in Grandma's Boy saying, I've seen that in GameStop. I've seen that in GameStop. We've seen that come through our offices at some point. Like it was such a unique slice of the 2000s that no other movie of that particular comedy genre has really captured outside of maybe Superbad. And
Superbad was like 07 or whatever. I feel like this was the end of that run of that style of movie that started with American Pie.
Mm-hmm.
And like the teen comedy, the stoner comedy, like it's to me better than the Harold and Kumar movies as much as I like them. This holds up better. Some of those movies have better individual scenes, but it's a more consistent film.
Yes, agreed.
And my final one is John Carpenter's The Thing. It's my favorite horror film.
Good pick. Very good pick.
I could have picked any of his movies. I really love Big Trouble in Little China. I love pretty much everything he's put out, but that is my go-to favorite horror film. Still has, in my mind, the best special effects to scare me that are practical that I've ever seen. There are other movies that have done really good ones, but I feel that it has the strongest cast I've ever seen in a horror film.
Yeah, it's definitely the best ensemble. They're great interactions, minimal score. It works. And it really plays with that sense of isolation, which you don't get from too many horror movies where you get the sense, because like the setting for The Thing, for those of you that aren't familiar, happens in the Antarctic. They find something in the ice and it basically starts picking them off one by one. You don't know who's a friend, who's a foe. And
there are people to this day that analyze the script, analyze the video, every frame of it, watch it over and over, back and forth, even rewind scenes that try to interpret at what point you find out who is the thing and who isn't the thing, and then try to interpret the ending, because it ends on what might be the most bleak ending I've ever seen. You have, spoiler, we're 40 years in. It's two people. You follow the entire movie for the most part. You follow Kurt Russell's character, and the antagonist, sort of rival of his, is played by Keith David. And they get separated when they're destroying parts of the thing, and at the end they're in the snow and they don't know if each other is a thing or not, and they've run out of fuel because they were burning the things, or you could prick your finger and try to burn the blood, which has probably the scariest thing ever happened in film, where you see that piece of blood fly up and try to run away. But they're stuck in the snow, not knowing if each other is a thing, and they're starting to freeze, and they have their weapons, but they don't want to burn each other if they're both human, and they just say, how about we just stay here and take a break for a bit? And the camera just zooms out as they're staring at each other freezing in the snow. So if anybody finds them, one of them is either the thing, neither of them might be the thing. It's also possible that they're both the thing, because the thing tries to protect itself to the point where once it starts to duplicate, parts of it can be separate.
It copies memories too.
Yes, so it might not even know it's the thing until it's threatened. So there's but if they're both a thing, they'll just freeze dormant until somebody finds them. And if neither of them is the thing, then basically their story goes untold and they all die. Lots of analysts have gone and trying to figure it out, because it's a remake of a 1950s movie that wasn't very good. The 1950s movie was good for the time, but this is a story that you could do now. And they tried to remake the thing or do a sequel to it, where it's about or is it a prequel?
It's a prequel. Yeah. They go back and find the research station where it was originally found.
And I refused to watch it for one reason.
It's terrible.
It was going to be entirely practical effects. They even had it budgeted out for it. Mm-hmm. Studio overruled them and said, no, you're spending more money on visual effects. And they gave them more money and said, you have to spend it on CGI. And then it looked terrible. They were actually told not to use practical effects because the studio has this budget set aside for special effects to use in this movie. It's one of those things where a studio gets tied in with an effects company. And the effects company says, we won't do this many movies until you've paid for this many movies. So basically, to get them to work on some other movie, they then have to give them the contract for this movie. It's a whole bunch of bureaucracy and crap they get stuck in, which is why so many movies now don't have practical effects, because they're basically beholden to ILM, to Weta, and to any of these companies that do special effects. So there's a whole bunch of bullshit backstory that basically the director washed his hands of the movie anyway, so I won't even watch it. And apparently there's a game
Isn't it literally directed by Alan Smithy?
Which is that's what they do when they take their name away from it, right?
That's what I thought.
The guild will let them do that. So it's one of those movies, I think, where they did that, where it's like, I'm so disgusted with what the studio did to my movie, I don't want my name attached.
Now, there have been several games based on the thing, and I think one of them was actually okay. I think the one for the original Xbox was all right.
Yeah, is that the one where it's like constantly with the circuit breakers over and over again?
I don't remember. I've only played it once.
But yeah, fantastic story. Still my favorite horror film. So that's sort of the gamut. I love action movies. You see me talking about Van Damme movies and all that over and over again. I can watch these things, but these are my 5 that are my go-tos that I've seen the most. I've seen The Thing probably 20 times in its entirety, and in certain scenes, more than that. Grandma's Boy about the same. Starship Troopers about the same. Boogie Nights I've seen probably 20-ish. And then Transformers is 500.
Now I feel like a hipster for my choices.
So for mine, I'm not very imaginative on them overall, because I've watched some recently that have kind of revitalized some old memories. Of course, I've gone through and rewatched every Star Trek film recently just because of Picard. Even though not all of them have anything to do with it, but just so I could watch them sequentially. Other than the Abrams films, I have not rewatched those recently, but I don't really care either. So one of my favorite films in that series is Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. It's one that's always kind of stuck with me because even when I was a kid, I had the VHS tapes, and that was the one that I watched 90% of the time. And I still continue to watch that film. I just like the overall premise. I love the Enterprise A. I like the joining with the Excelsior kind of showing up. The whole conspiracy behind the scenes. And it's the final send off of the original crew. Same token, I also like Star Trek Nemesis, but for a similar reason, because it's the send off of the TNG crew, even though it wasn't a great send off. You had so many different powerful moments, with, Picard facing demons, and in the same parallels of Data doing the same with another Soong type robot or android, and the possibilities that Data could live beyond it, even though they have kind of squashed that in Picard as far as we know. So those are kind of neck and neck in there. The Police Academy series is another one that kind of resonates with me, because when I want a really stupid comedy that is fun but entertaining, I go to that series. I rewatched the first two recently, and my favorites are definitely the first, the third, and the fourth, because once they lose Mahoney, which is Steve Guttenberg, after the fourth film, they get another guy that kind of takes his place, and I can't remember his name, but he's in movie 5, 6, and 7.
Isn't
you know that it gets?
Isn't that one?
What's that?
One of your arch nemesis, Mike? Isn't Gutenberg one of Mike's arch nemesis? I remember him saying he got in a fight with him on Twitter. Yeah,
I wanted
get in a fight with him, or you wanted to get into a fight with him over something.
It didn't work.
Yeah, I was sorry. I've only ever seen, I think, 2 scenes out of any of those 7 or 8 movies. I saw like where the girl gets naked in one part because I was like 12.
I've seen the first 4
naked scene, and I saw a part where doesn't the old guy get blown when he's giving a speech?
First movie.
Something. That's all I've seen. I've never actually watched
it's funny
them.
because
I'm gonna have to sit
Mahoney
down and watch
or
them.
Steve Guttenberg, he's working in a car lot and parking cars, and he more or less has to go to police academy, and they won't let him drop out. So he's kind of stuck there and has to take the training and everything. But he drags along Michael Winslow, who does the sound effects, and he's like, "Yeah, what's you in here for?" And then he pulls up a speaker thing, and he goes like that, like machine gun inside of a police station, and they're like, "Would you stop that?" And so like he manages to tackle him into the police academy too. But I also like what's his name? He plays Lieutenant Harris in this movie, becomes Captain Harris later, but I like him better than Mauser. Mauser is the one that they kind of jump to when he's not there. And he's kind of very Weasley, but he looks like a discount, like fat William Shatner. As a weird way of putting it. So it's funny in that sense. But no, I overall enjoy the series because there's a lot of stuff that goes on, a lot of funny things between actors and characters, and you definitely get some of the iconic voice actors from this series too that kind of jump over to animation shortly thereafter. And although most of them haven't done diddly squat since leaving the police academy.
A few of them have actually died too.
Yeah. Yep.
It's been 35 years or more for some of those films, right? So
yeah, they came out in the 80s. But yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoy that series. Another that I enjoy is the National Treasure films.
Mm-hmm. Modern day Indiana Jones.
Yeah, modern day, but I like it because specifically it's Nicolas Cage in his weird mannerisms and ways of doing things. It comes out really entertaining and fun. And then they, unfortunately, at the end of the second one, they leave it on kind of that they could wrap it up, or that his mission, his journey kind of continues for search treasures. And he's talking with the president, did you find what I asked you to look at on page 17? And he's like, yes. And I think I can help you with that. And, then they go wandering off and you don't even know what's going to happen next, because they were going to intentionally do a third film. And then it just kind of never came up.
Well, there are rumors that it's going to happen.
No, I just look right here. It says, in July 2018, Turtletaub reiterated that the script was possible. The third film was close. Disney was not completely sold on the idea. In January 2020, it was announced that Chris Bremer, the writer of Bad Boys for Life, would write a new script for it, and that they're deciding whether or not it's going to be a theatrical movie or if it's going to go on to Disney Plus.
Either way, I'd be excited to see a third film.
I would love to see if they did a series with Nick Cage needs something that's not direct to video.
Really. It would be cool to have him do like a 10 episode season of National Treasure.
Or if they maybe do it the style that they're doing the aren't a couple of the Marvel ones going to be 6 episodes?
Yeah.
So why don't you make it, instead of a third movie that's 2 hours long, make it 4 hours and make it like 5 or 6 40-minute episodes that tell the story, so they can take their time.
That could turn out better, honestly. Either way, I would be really excited to see National Treasure come back with Nick Cage. This is kind of tied for me, this last one here that I've got, because it's Jim Carrey. So Fun with Dick and Jane, which is actually a remake, and it's got Jim Carrey plastered all over it, and kind of how he acts, and playing this guy who loses his job working for this big energy trading company, and then they kind of joke and tease at the end of the movie the Enron thing, and so he basically does a whole heist, stealing money from banks and from wherever he can get money to keep paying for his bills, and miraculously pulls all this stuff off, and then does the same thing to his boss who laid him off, and he's like, I'm tore up about it. It's Alec Baldwin playing the boss, and he says, I had to sell my beach home and blah blah blah, and he's got like 4 other houses, and he's got like, and I saved $200 million in a fund for myself. And so they basically liquidate the fund and give it to all the unemployed workers. And then the boss looks like the one that did it, even though he got screwed. But the other movie I like is Ace Ventura.
I love a good heist movie too. And anytime, like
Ocean's 11 is my heist movie.
Really good underrated movie is the Jason Statham movie, The Bank Job. Really good. It's not an action movie. It's an old school, dig under the bank to heist movie. Those kinds are always great.
But yeah, and then my final one's Ace Ventura, but for obvious reasons, because it's fun.
Original or When Nature Calls?
Second one.
Yes, the one that everybody hated at first, but kids loved.
You must be the Monopoly guy.
I saw that one in theaters like 3 times.
I'm sorry. Is there something in my
Look,
teeth?
the mother rhino's giving birth.
That is one of the most ridiculous scenes.
Yes, it is.
He's trying to eat his way out. What I love is when he lands on the ground, he lands and he just goes gasping for air. Mommy! And they run away.
And then he's driving the monster truck. Nobody wants to play with me.
When he gets hit with a dart and he's like, huh, starts running.
Then he goes all
darts
floppy.
Is too many. And every part of his body turns to rubber. Or when he loves every animal on the planet except for bats.
Yeah.
And he finally goes into the cave and he's like, I'll be safe as long as I've got my torch. Something screeches at him, take that, winged spawn of Satan. And he throws it and he goes, I'm okay. And then it's just him screaming as he runs out, they're in my hair. It's so,
that movie's funny.
We're getting the dude from Tommy Davidson from In Living Color with him is the miniature fighter, and he throws the
spears in his knees.
In his knees. Ah! It's in the bone.
I forgot how funny that one movie was.
Well, what's sad is they were going to do that's the only time like Jim Carrey did a sequel up until he did Dumb and Dumber 2 or Dumb and Dumber, and it actually landed really well. But when he did the Dumb and Dumber sequel, that movie was such garbage. I totally get why he never did sequels after Ace Ventura 2, and they tried to get him back for a third one, but they did Ace Ventura Jr. and had basically his son.
Oh, it was terrible.
And then wrote him out by having him lost in the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, no, the first one as a kid I only saw briefly, and I didn't really get it. It's much darker in its comedy, not as much for kids, obviously. Like the first scene is he gets a payment in blowjob.
Yeah,
and like she goes like, I can give you the money, or how about I take your pants off? And he's like, well, let me think about it. Sure. And then like that's how he gets paid in that. That's literally what he does. And then he's holding onto a bar as he's swinging his body around wildly, and you can only see him from behind.
Well, you hear the zipper and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Or just the entire
Einhorn is a man.
Yeah, and like which doesn't fly as well anymore in today's society of like how the entire joke of the movie is that everybody has kissed Einhorn at one point, and then they realize that she's a man, so they all start barfing.
Yeah, and
like
brushing their teeth.
It's still funny, but it wouldn't fly, I think, for a Jim Carrey movie anymore.
Oh God, no.
The second one is more silly, and I think people didn't like it, but it probably holds up better. It also has the most stupid joke in the history of the world. But
Bumblebee Tuna?
No.
Everybody loves a slinky.
Yes. The opening gag of putting a slinky down all the steps.
Go, Slinky, go!
And he's trying to get it to go down like 7,000 steps, and it stops.
And it makes it all the way down to the second to the last step.
And he goes, and he's getting ready to go back up to the top and start it over again.
He's like, do we have time to do it again?
Yeah, that and just when
the airplane where she's like, peanuts, and he's like, no, I think I'm doing rather well right here or whatever, and she says, no, peanuts, and he goes, oh yes.
No, just the when he meets the chief and he finds out how they show their appreciation for each other is
they hawk a loogie.
Yeah, and then he's like, well then, and they just hear him going,
and he goes,
and then like they have to like zoom out. They cut away and they walk out, and they're just slimed from head to toe.
All of them.
Yeah. But again, it still adds a little bit, just a little bit of that humor from the first one, like how it ends.
But it's super stupid, like funny.
Yeah, like the ending, like the only sexual joke really in the entire thing is at the very end when she's finally back and she's getting married, and then they're like he's saying that she's not a virgin. He's like, they can tell that, and he's running away. So obviously, at some point in the movie, he had sex with the princess. So, and that's how the movie ends, is him running away from them. So overall, it is the better of the two, but at the time it was critically panned, like really bad.
Which is probably why he never did another sequel.
Well, if you look 1994 to 1995, he did Ace Ventura 1, Ace Ventura 2, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, all in a 16-month period. Insane.
Yeah, which is funny because those are some of his best movies.
Yeah, and the ones that hold up the most are by far Dumb and Dumber and Ace Ventura 2. I think I like Ace Ventura 2 better, but Dumb and Dumber has probably the more memorable movie overall for people.
Well, just the quotes alone. But I think that about wraps this episode up.
Yes, it does.
Indeed. Yeah, you can see by the movies we picked kind of what our personalities are like. Notice that we didn't all pick as many sci-fi or space ones as we thought we would. I figured we would have.
Well, I did, but
now
mine was comedy though too.
Was anybody here entirely predictable?
I don't think so.
No.
Really?
You're more predictable because you you wear your movies on a sleeve like publicly all the time. I knew there was going to be an Alien movie. I was expecting.
I knew there was going to be Harry Potter.
Right now because you put a contemporary one in there, but I knew for sure there was going to be some form of Alien and some form of Ghostbuster, or one of the two. I figured you would have had an X-Files Fight the Future in there.
I was thinking about either putting that one, Transformers 1986, or Goodfellas. If I had to replace one, I would have put Goodfellas in there.
I am surprised you didn't have Ghostbusters 1, because you said that that's your go-to you've seen more than anything whenever you felt down.
Yeah. But it comes and goes. Like, it's weird. Like, the more I watch the movie, it's not so much that I notice different flaws in it or anything. It's just, I wonder if my fandom is waning with it.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when the new one comes out, if it brings you back into the fold. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the girl one did irreparable damage to a lot of the community.
Yeah, it definitely split the community. I mean, like, for me to stay in the Ghostbusters fandom, it's always been the comic books have really helped, and IDW has done a fantastic job with it. Speaking of which, this may be of interest to Steve. I don't know. They finally put out the trade paperback for the Ghostbusters versus Transformers, so you can pick that up now in trade. So yeah. If I did have to replace something, I might put Goodfellas on this list, because I saw that movie a lot in the hospital, but I really liked it before, because I think, Alex, you showed it to me for the first time like a couple years ago. And it just
probably if I had to put one that was like that kind of movie in, I wouldn't take Boogie Nights off, but I could take Starship Troopers if I had to off, and I could put Casino. That's the one I like the best out of the Scorsese crime movies. As much as I really like the new Irishman, and I also like Gangs of New York. And I also like Departed. I feel that Casino was my favorite of that batch. So I don't think mine would have been too predictable, except for Transformers. That was probably going to be
the original
all of our
movie,
lists at some point. I don't think.
I'm surprised you guys didn't say, "Hey, where the hell's RoboCop?"
You fluctuate though.
Well, as much as I love RoboCop, if I'm going to pick a Paul Verhoeven movie, it's Starship Troopers. I don't think anybody was going to peg me for Boogie Nights or maybe The Thing, but as I have said, that's my favorite horror film. I would say Boogie Nights and Grandma's Boy. You wouldn't know to put on there unless I told
mine you would know, because if anybody listened to M-Wire back in the early days, like the first year of the program, I had great fun editing those episodes. So
I always want my changes and my taste to be ever changing, ever evolving as I learn new things. Like, one of my favorite movies I didn't include on this list is, I'm a big fan of documentaries. Like, I forget the name of it, but I love the subject matter. There's a documentary on Canon Films that came out like years ago that I really liked.
Electric Boogaloo, the totally something story of Canon Films.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. In Search of Darkness, which was the 80s documentary we did this past year on Twig with the director David Weiner. Never Sleep Again, Crystal Lake Memories would have been like, hell, I could make a top 5 documentaries really easy.
While you pull it up, I can give you mine right now. The ones I like. Heart of Darkness, that's I believe that's the one
doc. The
doc on Apocalypse Now. So there's the one. I would say I really enjoyed the one I recently just saw actually for a review. I have to have the review out soon. Is Paris is Burning. That's the documentary on basically the start of voguing and like transgender culture in New York City in the 80s, when that was like really underground. You see like how New York City was 30 years ago. And those two are probably like at the top of my mind right now. I do like the ones like you like that are ones on like
genre
genres and that. But I also really like ones where there's just like, let's just focus on a person, somebody I've never heard of, or a topic or a subject that is so out of my wheelhouse of what I know and understand, which is why I like The Paris is Burning. It's like, it's a world that I have nothing invested in, that I'm like, oh, I would have never known that without seeing this. And I also like the ones where they're like showing how bad a movie came together. There's a really good one for Highlander 2 where they show off how bad the production was in Argentina. And that's those are probably my top 3.
I would say Bowling for Columbine would definitely be on my list, because that movie was very influential in how politically active I became as I went into college. Never Sleep Again and In Search of Darkness would be my top 3.
Cool. And yeah, we've rambled on enough.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve. I don't know whether you have a top 3 docs or anything.
But yeah, so I think that about rounds it out. So until next time, you can get a hold of us on you guys at ThisWeekinGeek.net.
Yep, of course. We always answer email, which you can get us a hold of at feedback@ThisWeekinGeek.net. Either me or Alex will reply, or at our Twitter at ThisWeekinGeek. Once again, me or Alex will reply. Alex typically maintains the Twitter these days, as I'm taking sort of a less role on Twitter right now, just kind of a mental break sort of thing. I'm more posting just cute animal pictures. So,
you managed it for 12 years. I can take the reins for a bit.
Exactly, and I appreciate it.
So, and you can get a hold of me on the Twitters at AlteredGeek or at SCP21. You can email us feedback at alteredgeek.com. So until next time, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks.
The 2020 Mazda CX-9 is designed to elevate every moment with a sophisticated SUV experience. Stunningly crafted with 3-row seating, including second-row captain's chairs. Book a test drive at Mazda.ca. The 2020 Mazda CX-9 is designed to elevate every moment with a sophisticated SUV experience. Stunningly crafted with 3-row seating, including second-row captain's chairs. Book a test drive at Mazda.ca.